Doctors have read it. What was the most shocking case of, "Oh, I thought that was normal," you've seen in a patient? ERMB here. Had a patient come in for cast removal literally years after it had been put on. She had just decided it wasn't worth taking off. Her leg skin was literally growing over the top of the cast, and then down it. Once we finally cut the cast off, she was surprised to find that she had no skin underneath, but the dead tissue over her muscles and bones was being cleaned by about 300 maggots. I knew by the smell that something under there wasn't right, but wasn't expecting that. Patient seemed completely fine with it. Whatever. When I was a med student, we visited a clinic in the country where I studied. Lots of people would get horrible injuries and use the local elixir of dirt, motor oil, spit from the local old lady to patch up an exposed arm bone, or whatever. Had one woman in her 20s come in with a fungating breast cancer that looked like a hard mushroom mold growing through the skin into the outside world, constantly bled any time you touched it. Her family shamed any injuries or impurities, and she thought she just needed to keep it covered until it got better. Unfortunately, I have seen this on 2 occasions, both at hospitals that were in middle to upper class communities here in the US. One was a 40-years-old woman, a successful business owner and fully insured. Her sister made her go to the ER because she COCP. She was asked to put on a gown for an EKG. I will never forget the sight or odor of her breast. It literally looked like green hamburger. Sadly, she did not seek care sooner because she said she was embarrassed by the appearance, and later the odor. I followed her care as best I could. She went through bilateral mastectomy, radiation TX and chemo. She survived another 3 months of hell before she passed away. The second patient was a 28-years-old, mother of 2. No insurance and had to work to feed her family. She was seen for ACO neck pain. Physical exam X-ray revealed both breasts to be full of tumor. I know she had a double mastectomy, and I lost track of her for some time. Approximate 2 years later, I ran into her at our kids' gymnastics meet. She was in remission and doing really well. Takeaway, ladies, guys too, please do your self-breast exams. Seek care ASAP if something feels off. Not a doctor, but a patient. I went in for thigh, hip pain. I couldn't lie on that leg for more than 30 seconds without pain. I thought it was muscular and my doctor thought it might be radiating back pain. I had several x-rays and learned I had broken my hip sometime in the past, had a floating bone chip in my hip, degenerative disc disease, a birth defect in my spine, and mild scoliosis. I don't know if this fits, but here's a story about my husband. We were messing around and he chased me through the kitchen, took a hard left turn and lost his footing. Fell on his side. He's a big dude, so falling is a bit more traumatic for him. He couldn't put pressure on his leg and knew immediately he was hurt pretty bad. He was able to crawl to the couch, and once settled said he wasn't in too much pain. He decided to sleep on the couch that night so he wouldn't have to go upstairs. We made an appointment in the morning for the ER so we wouldn't have to sit there all day, but they didn't have an opening until 2, so we just hung out at the house. He was in a decent amount of ambient pain, but it didn't seem emergent. Once we got to the hospital, we find out that he had broken his hip, in this case breaking off his entire ball joint from the top of his femur. The nurses said they couldn't believe that he was able to sit up and had slept on it, implying that we should have come the night before, and probably by ambulance. It required surgery with some hefty bolts to put it back into place. But the crazy part is that apparently a healthy 30-ish-year-old man breaking his femur from standing is highly unusual. After several tests and an MRI, it turned out he was in the early stages of osteoporosis due to a pituitary tumor in his brain. So we discovered a benign brain tumor all because dude was wearing slippery socks. Patient here. Went to the doctor for a note to have a day off work since I didn't feel great and just didn't want to work. Doctor poked me in the stomach, said, "That's not normal," and sent me off to have a scan, which took me 2 months to get around to. 2 weeks later I get a letter from the doctors asking me to come in. Change my shifts, so I go, and the doctor went off at me for not coming in sooner and told me to go home and pack a bag. I'm off to the Royal Brisbane. It might be cancer. More scans later and it's decided that it's not cancer. It was a 4-kilogram cyst. My only symptom was an enlarged stomach and the "you're getting fat" comments from my mother. Not a doctor, but have a story. My oldest son was 11 years old and needed a physical for youth tackle football. We had a new doctor, so she went into more detail than most physicals. He had complained that his ankle hurt during the middle of baseball season, so she asked if he could take off his shoe. When he did, she immediately points to the side of his foot where there was a strange bump and informed us he had a broken foot. I didn't believe her, as I pointed out he had the same thing on his other foot as well. She took a look and said, "Oh, he has 2 broken feet," and sent us over to get x-rays from the hospital. I was laughing, thinking this was so crazy, believing there was no way my son, who not only finished playing in a baseball tournament, but who was running and jumping at the swimming pool literally an hour before, had 2 broken feet. After the x-rays were completed, my smile quickly faded, as the doctor was right. That is when we learned about completely flat feet and the damage stress fractures can do when they go undetected. 8 weeks of casts and special shoes and insoles for the rest of his life solved the problem. His feet are still deformed, but it never slowed him down. Patient here. I thought everybody got itchy when playing outside. Turns out I'm allergic to every pollen grass mold in the state, and I shocked the doctor during my allergy test when she came back and my whole body was red lumpy. Kind of similar to this. I always broke out in hives on my legs in gym class or when I would exercise growing up. In high school, a dermatologist finally discovered that I'm allergic to my own sweat. She said she had seen a couple cases of it throughout her career. I take a daily allergy pill now and I'm fine, but definitely a fun fact I can bring up. When I was a medical student, a patient and his brother came in together. Patient was just a post-op visit after a hernia repair. Found out he had another, baseball-sized hernia. His brother, on the other hand, had literally had a football-sized hernia visibly coming out of his left leg of his shorts. Looked like an inguinal hernia, and he was able to use it as an armrest. I asked him if that bothered him at all, and he straight up said, "My brother's hernias were painful, but this isn't, so I thought it was just a quirky defect." I hope he was lying to save face, but we recommended he get it taken care of. MD here. Patient came in saying he was feeling a little tired and noticed he was having a harder time doing his job in construction, a particularly difficult type of construction. Turns out he had slowly lost 80% of his blood over the course of a few months. Dude was a badass to be working as hard and long as he was with only a fifth of normal blood volume. Hemoglobin was low 2s. Not being cheeky, where was it going? Like, how was he losing it? Stomach ulcer. I think it was from taking ibuprofen every day to dull the construction pain. Work at a dentist's office. Patient presents for an exam. Concerned part of her tooth has chipped off. On examination, it is not in fact a tooth that chipped off, but rather a piece of calculus, which is buildup of hard tartar that covers your teeth over time when you don't brush them. It can be small deposits, or in this case, an entire bridge, covering her actual teeth. She thought the calculus was tooth material, and was quite shocked to learn we were actually unable to see her real teeth, and she needed an extensive cleaning to remove it all. This one was actually from back when I was a medical student, but it's still the weirdest thing I've seen. Sorry this is long, but I promise it's worth it. It was my last rotation of medical school before graduating and starting residency. I had completed all my requirements, and just wanted to take a few interesting electives of things I hadn't seen yet. This was a dermatology rotation at the VA. The rotation had been interesting and chill, and it was my last day, and my third to last patient as a medical student. The guy came in, and the resident asked him why he was there, and he said, "I have hair coming out of my hand." I figured he meant a weird mole with some hair coming out. But this guy, prob late 30s or early 40s, says, "No, the hair is coming out from under the skin." The resident asked what he does for a living, and he says he's a barber. The resident tells me that it's not too uncommon for hair to poke through the skin, especially for barbers who cut men's hair. It's short, thin, and can be kinda pokey after all, and it was sort of like getting a sliver, but with hair. But the guy says, "No, it's a lot of hair, look!" And he holds up his hand making a fist, and there's several hairs poking out from between the knuckles of his pointer and middle finger. I stare in confusion, and the derm resident grabs some tweezers and pulls out a tweezer full, maybe a half dozen, of short black hairs. The guy says, "Yeah, I already pulled out like 50. The derm resident was like, "50? So the derm resident numbs up the back side of his hand between the first and second knuckle, and makes a little incision, and starts pulling out gobs of short black hair. Chunk of 20, chunk of 30, etc. And now she's got the magnifying glasses on and the attached light, and she like, "Oh my gosh, there's still more in there. Sir, do you know how all this hair got into your hand?" And the guy goes, "Oh, it probably came in through there." And he flips his hand over to reveal a hole in the palmar aspect of his hand's skin. Turns out the dude had cut himself like 2 years before this, and it had never healed properly. He was diabetic, and he just kept cutting hair with this open wound on his hand. And probably every day a few hairs got stuck in his hand. For 2 years. And now those hairs had tunneled through the webbing between his first and second fingers from the front of his hand and out the back side. The poor resident spent like 30 minutes milking his hand and fingers while more and more hair came out. She said, "There's no way I got it all out. You have to come back every 2 weeks for a few months for us to keep removing more hair from your hand." Which is a weird sentence. In the meantime, wear gloves while you cut hair. We gave the dude a whole box of latex gloves. I don't remember anything about my last 2 patients that day. It was literally my last day as a med student, and boy, what a way to go out. Still probably the weirdest thing I've ever seen, not to mention how, there's some hair in my hand, happens I guess. The guy was about it. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.